So on the Sega Saturn, which was the console that came out after the Sega Genesis, Sonic really didn't have much of a presence. There was a Knights game, which was kind of a spin-off of the Sonic franchise, but there was really no true Sonic game on the Sega Saturn. So while Sonic didn't have much of a presence on the Sega Saturn, the next console from Sega was the Dreamcast. And that console launched in 1999 with Sonic Adventure, which was Sonic's true first foray into full 3D.
There was a lot riding on it because in a lot of ways it was, in fans' eyes, comparable to Super Mario 64. And Sonic never actually made an appearance, an original appearance on the Sega Saturn to what people wanted. And it was the first kind of original 3D Sonic game.
It was a lot more expansive, but it was still familiar because it still had the same kind of fast and quick and simple gameplay that Sonic was known for.
It wasn't quite perfect, but it was a really cool way to translate Sonic into 3D.
Basically, he just cruised around this 3D world. He was still super fast, still had all his abilities. He could crouch into a ball and spin and jump on enemies and things like that.
It was sort of a more adventure-style type game.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot more expansive. It was a lot more detailed and lengthy adventure than we had seen Sonic in previously. And it also introduced some other characters.
You got to play Sonic, you got to play as Tails, you got to play some new characters, a robot, because, you know, kids love robots. And it had a lot of the Sonic feel. It was very fast. There was crazy camera movement. There was all the stuff that you wanted out of a Sonic game.
Sonic Adventure 2 came out later, and it just kind of expanded on the same concept of Sonic Adventure 1.
Sonic Adventure 2 had a lot in common with Sonic 2 on the Genesis because, once again, you had kind of a more confident game that was building on its predecessor.
It's just more of kind of the same running around, platforming in 3D. It wasn't especially remarkable, but it offered the same kind of fun that Sonic fans were looking for at the time.
And it also introduced a new character, which was Shadow the Hedgehog. And, you know, he wasn't as cute as Tails, and he wasn't quite as organic as Tails. He was a little bit more calculated, you know, because it was sort of a black, edgy hedgehog to sort of like counter Sonic. The story was sort of interesting, but a little hard to follow. People were sort of on the fence about the game because it did follow the structure of Sonic Adventure 1. You did have a certain amount of playable characters, and you had to, you know, use them in sort of like areas that were tailored to their specific skills. Probably the coolest thing about Sonic Adventure 2 was the Sonic and Shadow levels, because the one complaint a lot of people had about Sonic Adventure was it was fast, but it wasn't 2D fast. And you didn't have that sort of like crazy, oh my god, what's going to happen feeling, because you kind of knew it was going to happen. You were going to fall off the edge of the world and you were going to die. And so in Sonic Adventure 2, what happened was you had levels that were sort of on rails in certain sequences, but the bottom line was they were incredibly fast. They were just like wickedly fast, and they were almost as fast as the 2D stuff. And you had that same rush. You didn't have to worry about too much. You just needed to worry about keeping that line.
After Sega stopped supporting the Dreamcast and that went away, Sonic had to move to other platforms. So the Sonic Advance games came out on the Game Boy, and there were 3 of those, and they kind of brought it back to the simple gameplay where you're just kind of going from left to right, running real fast, jumping over things, going through loops and corkscrews and things like that. So they were a lot of fun.
Sonic has had to do what all mascots have done, you know, with the current generation of platforms, which is he's had to go 3D. And there are a lot of people who have been longtime fans and haven't quite gotten the same charge out of his 3D games as his 2D. And for a while, it looked like we were never going to see a 2D Sonic game. Thankfully, there's the Game Boy Advance. Sonic Team and Sega obviously wanted to keep their fans happy, so they've started sort of a side series called Sonic Advance that features, the people that we know. There's Sonic and there's Tails, and there's some new people. There's Cream the Rabbit, who's new, and she's got sort of a Chow with her, which is one of the characters that were introduced in Sonic's 3D games. They are really, really close to the spirit of the old school Sonic games, and they introduced some new features as well that have kept it, that have been fun and have that sort of like old school appeal to people. So if you need your 2D Sonic fix, you'll always have the Advance series. The Sonic series has had sort of a weird life because it was a Sega property, and the Sonic games were always Sega games. When Sega pulled out of hardware, there was a question as to what was going to happen. What we saw were Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 get ported over to the GameCube with some new content, and that was sort of a good solution, but the temporary solution was a game called Sonic Heroes, which was kind of a Sonic game, but they mixed in a couple things. It was basically you're controlling a team of 3 characters.
All of the characters that had previously been introduced, like Amy, Cream, Knuckles, Shadow the Hedgehog, and it introduced kind of a team play mechanic. So you'd be going through this level like in a Sonic Adventure game, but you'd have a team of characters, each with their own special ability, and you'd have to utilize that special ability to get through certain areas in the level.
Hey guys, spread out! Level up!